For months, NJZ had the public's backing as they challenged HYBE alongside Heejin. Fans who believe in protecting idols over corporations rallied behind them, just as they had in past cases like Luna's and Omega X's. Despite the media favoring HYBE, NJZ supporters stayed loyal. However, after the court hearing on March 7th, public opinion took a sharp turn, and many began to reconsider their stance. Nearly 4 months after NJZ's press conference, in which they declared they had terminated their contracts, the court issued a ruling on March 21st, siding against the group and putting a halt to any outside work for them unless a future trial could potentially reverse their contracts. To summarize the court ruling, let's start with one of NJZ's key claims, which was that Heejin's removal as CEO caused serious instability. The court dismissed this, stating ADOR had the authority to make business decisions and that Heejin's role wasn't a contractual necessity. NJZ also pointed to ADOR's strained relationship with Dolphiners as a reason for contract termination, but the court ruled that Dolphiners was irrelevant to the case and that any conflicts with them wouldn't justify breaking the contract. Another argument was that ADOR abandoned them after Heejin's departure, but the court countered that NJZ's own attempt to walk away had also disrupted management. When asked what circumstances would allow them to end their contracts, the court made it clear there were none. According to the court's decision, ADOR had invested significantly in New Jeans from their trainee days and had met their contractual responsibilities. Letting NJZ leave after just 2 years would result in major financial losses for the company. Following the ruling, opinions online were mixed. Some people felt upset, believing the girls should be allowed to leave what they saw as a toxic and harmful environment. A Twitter user wrote, "Stand celebrating the mistreatment and exploitation of artists who are minors as if their favorite idols are not also stuck in this exploitative idol industry." Not everyone shared the same view as a lot of people, including many Korean netizens, backed the court's decision. They criticized NJZ for acting emotionally and prioritizing feelings over the law. Most comments on online forums echoed the same point. It was clear from the start that ADOR would win because NJZ's case wasn't strong enough to justify ending the contract. One netizen commented, "The court's right though, you can't just throw a tantrum and say you want to leave so that cancels the contract. That's the whole point of a contract." Another person noted that other idols aren't staying because of love for their companies. They understand the binding nature of their agreements, stressing that the law should always take priority. Opinions got even more divided once NJZ released their statement after the ruling. In an Instagram post shared the same day, they stated that they accepted the decision but felt it didn't fully capture how much trust had been broken by ADOR. They also went on to criticize the rushed injunction process, which they claimed didn't give them enough time to properly present their case. NJZ then said that ADOR and HYBE had all the necessary information, while they were left to find details on their own, and that many people were too scared to help them due to fear of retaliation. Despite the ruling, NJZ made it clear they weren't backing down, saying they planned to fight the decision by submitting more evidence and presenting new legal arguments. They reiterated that they had honored their contracts and it was ADOR and HYBE who had mistreated them, making it impossible to continue their work together. They emphasized that the injunction was just a temporary decision, and the real legal battle would take place at the upcoming hearing on April 3rd, where they hope to present a stronger case with more legal support. In the end, they wrote, "As we have stated before, regardless of any financial matters, we can no longer remain with a management that has disrespected our identities and undermined our achievements. The reason we are pursuing this legal action is to protect our dignity and rights." The statement only seemed to fuel more backlash against NJZ, as many people pushed back on several points they made. For instance, some argued that NJZ had no right to claim they didn't have enough time to present the facts in court. They pointed out that the conflict between HYBE and Heejin's side had been ongoing for a year, NJZ's live stream was in September, and they announced their contract termination in November. In their view, NJZ had plenty of time to prepare for the injunction, especially given they were facing a major corporation. Others took issue with NJZ's argument that the court didn't fully consider the breakdown of trust with ADOR, claiming it was impossible to support that claim since it was the only reason the group presented. One user wrote, "I'm sure they took it into account since that's like the only argument y'all gave. There's only so much weight they can put into that." Then, ADOR released a statement expressing their intent to communicate with NJZ and resolve the situation through open dialogue. They reaffirmed their role as the group's agency and promised full support moving forward. ADOR also confirmed that the ComplexCon performance would proceed as planned, under the New Jeans name backed by ADOR. ADOR also stated that they will dispatch staff to Hong Kong to support the group's performance under the name New Jeans rather than NJZ. Surprisingly, many backed this decision, saying that the company was doing the right thing. Comments on online forums said, "The employees must be annoyed and ADOR is treating them well." Even the KOO, which has always supported NJZ, seems to be shifting its stance. On Pan, while the top comments might be influenced, the upvote and downvote numbers tell a different story, as the criticism of NJZ clearly outweighed the support. While it's easy to manipulate comments, it's much harder to fake the upvote and downvote counts, as attempts to upvote with multiple accounts are quickly blocked. But what's with the turn in opinion? For many Korean netizens who had supported NJZ, the court's ruling against them was enough to change their stance. In Korea, there's a strong belief in following the law, so when the court dismissed all of NJZ's arguments, most people shifted their support to ADOR and the legal system. They saw NJZ's actions as a failure to honor their contracts, which they believed was also a failure to respect the law. As a commenter explained, "I think it's because how it looks like rich kids trying to go above the law when average citizen can't." On the other hand, K-pop fans who had stood by NJZ in their fight against HYBE and ADOR were expecting them to bring strong evidence and fresh arguments to the court. But when the hearing took place, NJZ stuck to the same claims they had been making all along. For many, this was frustrating. To them, not only did they fail to present anything new, but they also struggled to back up some of their original statements. One user questioned, "Who goes to court to unilaterally terminate a contract based on vibes?" And he said, she said, "Just find a company willing to pay your termination fee and call it a day." Some also brought up ILLIT as a reason not to support the NJZ members. As you may know, according to Heejin, ILLIT's alleged plagiarism was the main reason behind her dispute with HYBE, and NJZ later included it in their case for terminating their contracts. However, the court dismissed this argument, stating there was no solid proof that ILLIT had copied NJZ's concept. Furthermore, the ruling questioned whether NJZ's concept was even legally protected under intellectual property laws. Another issue involved an incident with ILLIT's manager, which Honey had previously mentioned during the live stream in September. She recalled being alone in a hallway at HYBE's building when a girl group from another label, along with their manager, walked by. At first, they exchanged greetings, but when they passed her again, the manager allegedly told them not to acknowledge her. However, when NJZ presented this in court, their claim had shifted. They now argued that the ILLIT members not only ignored them, but also mocked Honey through words and actions. Despite this accusation, they didn't specify what was said or provide any evidence. And because of this, the court questioned whether Honey had actually heard the supposed remark, noting inconsistencies in her account. On the same day, she had messaged Heejin in English, mentioning that 3 ILLIT members had greeted her, though somewhat stiffly. Additionally, CCTV footage from HYBE showed the ILLIT members bowing in her direction. Given this, the court determined there was no solid proof that they had ignored or mocked her. Because the group's legal representatives had claimed something entirely different from what Honey had said, many couldn't help but resent the members for the hate train that ILLIT had gone through since this whole thing started. Some believed this was an attempt to make their claims seem more credible, but it had the opposite effect, especially since ILLIT were made out to be the bad guys instead of the manager. So instead of gaining support, it only fueled skepticism, making people question whether any of NJZ's accusations were true. As one commenter put it, "The fact that they've changed this looks really bad and feels much more like an attack at ILLIT. There's zero point in lying now and trying to make it look worse when it was already unkind of the manager to do something like that, and ILLIT were never at fault." Even those who were convinced that ILLIT had indeed plagiarized NJZ and that their manager had instructed them to ignore Honey started demanding an apology from NJZ. People were also upset that the members continued to sell and wear NJZ merchandise despite the court ruling that they shouldn't promote themselves under that name. Making matters worse, ADOR staff couldn't reach them at the event, had no way to meet them in person, and weren't even told about their hiatus. This only fueled public outrage, as many felt the group was contradicting their claims of standing up for workers' rights while making things harder for ADOR employees. Some pointed out that these staff members weren't high-level executives, but regular workers with much lower pay, yet they were the ones being caught in the middle and ignored by the members. Another commenter wrote, "Rich people fighting with rich people, and the employee goes through this because he has to eat and pay the bills." Additionally, it was revealed that Hani and Danielle had messaged and met with a fan notorious for criticizing groups like ILLIT, LE SSERAFIM, and BTS, which added fuel to the fire. So, while NJZ initially gained widespread public and fan support, it's looking less likely that they'll maintain that backing. The group still has a strong fan base, which became especially obvious after their performance livestream hit over 1 million views, but it seems they're losing some of their original supporters. However, this battle is just beginning, with a major hearing on April 3rd and the legal proceedings expected to continue for up to 3 years. So, do you think NJZ will manage to hold on to their fan base, or will they lose it as the drama unfolds? Share your thoughts in the comments below.